Today, the committee continues to examine the Obama administration's nuclear diplomacy with Iran. We thank our witnesses for joining us this morning. And the administration, of course, has just announced a hugely consequential agreement. In testimony before this committee, Secretary Kerry told us these negotiations would be used to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. That was the goal. Instead, this agreement allows Iran to retain a vast enrichment capacity, to continue its research and development, and gain an industrialized nuclear program once key provisions of this agreement begin to expire in as little as 10 years. The President told us that Iran does not need to have an underground fortified facility like Fordo in order to have a peaceful nuclear program. Yet this military complex will now stay open. While the Obama administration officials first told us that Iran's missile program would have to be addressed as part of a final agreement, they failed to mention that addressing the program means taking restrictions off. We're talking here about the ICBM program that Iran has, taking those off in just 8 years. As Secretary of Defense Carter testified just last week, quote, "The reason that we want to stop Iran from having an ICBM program is that the I in ICBM stands for intercontinental, which means having the capability of flying from Iran to the United States," unquote. And as we know, countries build ICBMs for one reason: to deliver weapons. And recently in this negotiation, at the very end of the negotiation, this is what Russia and Iran pushed for: the ability for Russia to transfer this technology. This is what Russia would like to do: transfer this technology to the regime. At that same hearing, our top military official gave his best military advice. Quote, "Under no circumstances should we relieve the pressure on Iran," unquote, when it comes to the arms embargo. But that comes off in just 5 years. On the critical issue of inspections, just a few months ago, Secretary of Energy Moniz said that, quote, "We expect to have anywhere, anytime access," unquote. But anywhere, anytime has weakened to something called managed access. Managed access, more accurately, should be called manipulated access, as any process with Russia, China, and Iran at the table will be treated exactly that way. It will be managed. It will be manipulated. The inspection regime will be manipulated by those with something to hide, and this has been the past experience with Iran that has cheated on every agreement so far. We might feel better if the United States was able to permanently constrain Iran's worrying nuclear program. But the key restriction, the ability to enrich at high levels, begins to expire in as little as 10 years. That's 10 years. Most Americans will take 3 times longer to pay off their mortgages. 10 years from now. Once these restrictions expire, Iran could enrich on an industrial scale, claiming the desire to sell enriched uranium on the international market, as France does. Iran could also enrich uranium to levels near weapons grade, claiming the desire to power a nuclear navy, as Brazil is doing. All these activities are permissible under the NPT, and all would be endorsed by this agreement. Indeed, the President himself, President Obama, said of his own agreement, in year 13, 14, 15, Iran's breakout times would have shrunk almost down to 0, unquote. As a result, the U.S. and its allies will be left with no effective measures to prevent Iran from initiating an accelerated nuclear program to produce the materials needed for a nuclear weapon. And Iran surely would be able to speed toward a nuclear weapon faster than international sanctions could be placed and reestablished on that regime. One nonproliferation expert told the committee last week that this sunset clause is, in his words, a disaster. The essence of this agreement is permanent concessions in exchange for temporary benefits, and that's only if Iran doesn't cheat, like it has in the past and like North Korea cheated. As one witness described to the committee last week, the deal is in many ways a bet. The bet that the administration is taking is that in 10 or 15 years, we will have a kinder, gentler Iran. Just a few days ago, Iranian President Rouhani joined a crowd which, if you followed the piece in the New York Times, the crowd were chanting "Death to America." This was their Quds Day rally on the weekend. And the posters read "Death to Zionism." And as Rouhani was walking, this reporter asked the question about the nuclear negotiations. And President Rouhani said, "The future is bright," as people behind him were chanting, "Death to America, death to America." So President Obama has decided to place all his chips on the fact that the death to America chance will soon disappear. This committee has to ask itself whether we are willing to roll the dice too.